Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Maryann Petri. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. The book Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, came out in 2020, followed by Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth, as well as Raised by These Wolves, How Family and Federal Courts Are Failing Our Children. And in July of 17th of 2024 came out Raised by These Wolves, Volume 2, Child Trafficking Through the Foster Care and Court Systems, came out as a bestseller. And I have a return guest on. I'm very happy to have Dawn McCarty back on. She was last on season 4, episodes 62, 74, and 123, as well as season 5, 62. And that was on January 27th, 2024, that I had her on last, season 62. And we're going to talk about her conference that she was in. It's called A Nothing About Us Without Us Conference, as well as her book, Warning, Children Are Not Weapons, with other authors involved in that as well. Unveiling the hidden truth of child psychological abuse related to parental and family alienation and abduction. And this is a groundbreaking anthology that reveals the hidden truths of child psychological abuse, specifically parental and family alienation and abduction. This powerful collection features raw, unfiltered stories from adult survivors who have courageously navigated the pain and challenges of family conflicts, ultimately finding their voices and reclaiming their lives, which I'm sure is extremely difficult. I welcome you, Dawn McCarty. Thank you for popping back on my podcast.
Oh, love being here anytime. I think this is amazing.
I think what you have done with this conference is amazing, and your book at the cover is stunning.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That was a fun cover. And actually, I think it's a fun fact. Like a lot of people are, either into AI or they're not. So it depends on which side of the fence you fall on. But I was able to generate a very relative image for the book by putting in exactly what it was that I wanted, and it was generated, and I thought it was stunning as well. So it really set the pace for the book that came out first, and we published that. Oh gosh, I'm gonna probably get the dates wrong. September 20th, I believe.
Wow.
It was a blur. We started earlier in the year, but we really started hitting the grindstone after July because I also published a book with Kids Need Both, which is the Hope for Families series project. So that was published on July 19th. So I had to wait until we got that one published so that I could focus on the second book, both of which made #1 bestsellers on Amazon. So that's amazing. But the second book was a little bit easier because I had the first one figured out on how to put it into Amazon, but we still had to work with the authors. We still had to do the editing. We still had a lot of work to do, and we wanted it done before the conference. So we were really close in time because we wanted to be able to use these books in conjunction with the conference. So the book is kind of like the preamble of our stories, which we share with we didn't necessarily speak about the stories we put in the book, but it gives you some insight and background to the people that are speaking at our conference. Now, there's criteria to be able to speak at our conference, and you have to be an adult survivor of child psychological abuse. So you have to have the connection there, and you don't have to necessarily speak only on that. You can share a little bit about your story. And the whole concept is to pull out the resilience and hope. So a lot of us have very similar stories. Some of us have had longer durations of time that we were separated. Some of us have shorter periods of time. But one thing that we know is that the pain is pain regardless. It doesn't matter the length of time or shortness of time. The pain is still there. And like I've said many, many, many times before, when children go through this, it's a life sentence for them. It's not something that goes away when they turn 18, regardless of what judges say in the courtrooms. That's just not reality. So this is something we carry with us. The psychological abuse can damage our relationships, our ability to cope, our ability to deal with conflicts in our future adult relationships. So one thing that I want to bring out of all of this is that you have a child as parents, they get married and they have a child. You do not own the child.
Right.
You are there to guide the child, but the
Mhm.
child owns the child's life. And everything that comes into their lives and what creates it, what moves them through life is theirs.
Mhm.
So you're making choices on their behalf, but you're not always making choices that are really in their best interest, even though we like to say that a lot. So I
Right.
think it's very important for
And
us
there
to let them own their life.
I agree, and to have their childhood that they deserve to have.
The childhood,
Ugh.
exactly. Just be children. They don't need to grow up fast and have to deal with regulating a parent and, feeling bad because they're hurting another one. And children are just trying to survive this conflict and they have no idea how to deal with that.
Mhm.
They become masters at regulating. And that's not a childhood. No child deserves to have to deal with that.
And also the splitting that a lot of parents
Hmm.
don't understand. I I read somewhere that splitting cannot be you can't fix that. W
Well, yeah, I mean, splitting, you can, once it's identified and there's an awareness. But if we don't teach society what we're actually doing when we say things that actually are splitting, then we're not helping society. We're not helping future generations because we're just perpetuating this transgenerational trauma that is normalized throughout society.
Mhm.
So we are all capable of splitting. And we just have to know that what it is and how to identify it and then stop doing it.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to a child, you can have grown-up conversations and split all you want. I've had recent conversations with adults that are engaged in splitting and triangulation, and it's traumatic to see and watch that kind of thing go on. But
Mhm.
when we're talking to children, we cannot engage in this kind of splitting where we're talking about their other parent and making them make these kind of decisions that they should never ever have to make,
Mhm.
ever. So,
Oh, I agree, and I also think a lot of this is court-induced parental
oh yeah,
alienation.
that's what the child psychological abuse is related to, the high conflict divorce in family court. Exactly.
And this is why, as you you know me, I want it abolished because this is for this reason.
Yeah. Well, I think there's some things that we can do that will
Mhm.
help. If we may or may not ever be able to abolish it, nobody knows, right? It
Mhm.
definitely needs some work. We need to make some updates and we need to make some changes and we need to make them now, very quickly.
Mhm.
And for the research that I was discussing with you earlier, that my friend Dr. Alyse Price-Tobler, she has spent um, years doing research and developing her studies. She actually received two twin PhDs. I don't need to say two and twin. She received twin PhDs. Sorry,
That's
I get
okay.
I get so excited about it.
Yeah.
Oh,
I wish I
two,
could have done that.
two. I guess I want to emphasize two.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did two studies, and the research that she pulled out of that and that she was able to discover is really going to help with going forward with all this. But one of the things we talk about a lot is there is no mental health practitioners in the family courtroom, so the judge has no help. The judge has zero help, not qualified to
Mm-mm.
identify, assess, or diagnose a personality disorder standing in front of him. So he's at his wits end, or she, they're at their wits end trying to determine, what do I do with this? I've got, frantic parent here, and I got, relaxed and very calm, almost weird parent over here. So you've got to miss a drastic change in the types of parents standing before you in a courtroom. So how do you make a judgment call?
Mhm.
So they need to have the help to be able to identify these mental health behaviors and or, um, I just lost the word I was going to say,
Personality disorder. Ah.
personality disorders, and move those cases from the courtroom and saying, first, you're going to be moved over here. You're going to go through mental health. You're going to have the assessment, diagnosis, treatment, etc.
Mhm.
Then when they are back on a level playing field and the parents are now working towards amicably raising, co-parenting their child, because we're talking about parents that are getting divorced not because of domestic violence or any danger or harm that could be imposed on the child, right? We're talking about the average cases of, we have high conflict in the
Mhm.
courtroom, but not necessarily because of any kind of violence.
Right.
So we're gonna move them out of the courtroom and we're gonna put them through mental health, and the practitioners that are qualified
Mm.
can actually do the diagnosis, the assessment, and the treatment. And then when they have created that plan, they move back into the family court so that they can dissolve their marriage.
Mhm.
That's the only thing that needs to be done in the family court. We don't need to go through all of these custody arguments
Right.
and stuff like that. Those can be done before you ever get to court. You just need to make sure that you're working together. And if you can't work together and we have a pathogen or pathogenic parent in there, then we
Mhm.
need to include the mental health piece. So the judge really needs an outlet
Mhm.
to move these cases out of his courtroom that he's not qualified or
Mhm.
he doesn't have the time to deal with those. So this is what we're suggesting is we bring back mental health practitioners, clinicians, not
Mhm.
just with the forensic psychologists and whatnot. They are not able to assess and diagnose and treat this type of behavior. So they may work on the custody arrangements and the orders and whatnot, but they're not there for mental health. They are not there for
Mm-mm.
mental health. I'm going to say that one more time. They are not there for mental health. So the only way that we can really help diagnose and have the judge be able to flag and see and identify this is by bringing back in the clinicians. They
Mhm.
need to be part of a high conflict divorce. And that's the only way I think we're going to be able to get through what we have right now called family court if we
Right.
can't reform it.
Right. The thing is, these clinicians, at least the ones that I've heard other parents talk about, they're not they don't even know what child psychological abuse is.
Right. That's another thing. So
Yeah.
that's the other half of her study. So one, she did the study on the adult survivors, and
Okay.
then she also did a study with the top 10 world-renowned experts in this area. And she is creating a treatment protocol for this. So what she has determined in from the results of her studies is that the mental health practitioners have not been taught how to identify child psychological abuse. So
Mhm.
these books that she's published both of her PhDs in books. They're available on Amazon. They're not in a university library. They're not on
Mhm.
apa.org or whatever the websites are that you can publish your work in. She published them in books so that anybody can access them. So you can just buy them on Amazon and you
Mhm.
can read. And these are, and they're more like a textbook. I tell her all the time, these are textbooks. We need to think of these as textbooks for the mental health practitioners to be able to use. We should be putting them in the colleges. They should be in the courtrooms
Mhm.
so that the judge can see, okay, I can now identify and see this, and now I understand why I need a mental health practitioner in my courtroom, so that he can push those off to the qualified body to deal with them. So
Right.
yes, we definitely need to up the ante when it comes to training our mental health experts
I
and
agree with you.
understand the difference between the forensic side and the clinician side.
Mm. I agree. I agree. The other issue I'm hearing from parents is that judges will just label a parent mentally ill.
And they're not qualified to do that.
Right. Even
So
attorneys do
that's a
that.
message and attorneys are definitely not qualified to do that, and they should not be doing that. That
Mhm.
is actually causing harm to not only the parents but the child.
Mhm.
So if the child goes back and reads the information about their parents' divorce when they get older, are they going to see stuff like that? These are things that people don't think about. They think that once the child's 18, they'll go on their way, they'll go reconnect with their parent, but that just does not happen. It does not happen that way.
Mm-mm.
We are stuck with this fear phobia. There's a factitious disorder that we are living and surviving with. So in order for us to be able to just say, I'm 18 now, and now I'm going to go have a relationship with my absent parent, it is not as simple as they think it is. So they don't think beyond the age of 18 if they think that far in advance at all. So when they make these decisions during the court proceedings, that child may eventually see that information. And the attorneys and the judges are the ones that could be instigating a higher conflict in the family court.
I agree. They are. It's bad. It's when you have practitioners that allow parents to bring in court orders and transcripts and read them to the kids with the psychologist sitting there, these people should have their licenses taken away.
I think that a lot of it is education as well, because we know that attorneys are there to win. That's their goal. They're there to win at all costs. The
Mhm.
all costs is the part I want to caution them about. You cannot win a family court case at all costs, because that includes child abuse.
Mm-hmm.
You are enabling child abuse by winning at all costs. So stop it right now. You have to think about the child. The children do not deserve to have to live and endure a high conflict divorce like this.
But these attorneys, a lot of them are just not ethical. They don't care because they want that
Then
conflict
they need
going.
to lose their license, because this is something that you're
Mm.
talking about, child abuse. And if anybody is out there enabling or contributing to child abuse, should lose their license. So if they're that unethical, they need to be identified and they need to be removed out of the family court system, because they can't be trusted with children who are suffering with child abuse. I'm getting hard on this. I'm getting very hard on this, because it is literally child abuse to have a child go through the psychological damage. And people say, well, they're not bruised. They don't have any cuts or bruises. I can't see their pain. I can't see the abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not all abuse is visible. This is normalized in society and it needs to stop. We need to bring this awareness that psychological abuse is a pain that lasts for decades and may never ever be solved, because they just don't know how to identify it or heal from it, which is why Alyse is writing the protocol, so that we can get more mental health practitioners able to address and able to talk to adult survivors. Because we're out there and there's a lot of things that are said about the mental stability of an adult survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be that definitely can be the case if they're not treated. So it is very hard on mental health experts to work with an untreated adult survivor of psychological abuse when they don't know how to identify it. And if they don't know how to identify it, it becomes traumatic for them. So they have this vicarious trauma that they're now experiencing because of a client that they haven't been able to identify child psychological abuse.
And then there's those ones there that they're uneducated and they don't care. They just,
Right.
I've reported to psychologists and it just wasn't unethical enough with the child psychological abuse.
See, and that's the thing. Once we start realizing, because with this conference on October 10th, there's a special reason why we picked October 10th.
Mm-hmm.
October 10th is World Mental Health Awareness Day.
Mm-hmm.
And we are also claiming that as Child Psychological Abuse Awareness Day, because it is not normal in society to discuss psychological abuse and what children are going through.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to start having these conferences every year so that we can bring this to the public. They need to know that when you see a friend or a spouse or a family member or somebody else actually using their child as a weapon and saying, you need to go to your father's house and spy on him, or you need to, reject your mom and say this and this and this to them. You need to respond in this way to that parent, or you need to act this way around this one. That is weaponizing a child,
Mm-hmm.
which is what our book is about. So we are not weapons. We are not to be used to go against your ex-spouse. So that happens to be our parent. We have a totally different relationship with them than you had as an intimate partner. We don't know what that relationship's like, nor should we. So if you're not going to, if we don't need to know that, then we don't need to know about your divorce either. So this has to be separated. So it definitely needs to get out there, and the public needs to be able to identify and say, hey, that is child psychological abuse, which you just said to your child right there, or to your grandchild, or to your niece. You know, it could be nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles. It could be anybody. If there's family alienation is also a thing. So it doesn't necessarily have to come from a parent. That's just what we're dealing with most of the time. But some of this comes from other family members.
They also recruit their friends as well.
Yes, that's triangulation. Yeah, and that further traumatizes the child, because now there's even more pressure. And now it's not just what they're doing in front of just a parent. Now it might be a school teacher that's been brought into this little club. And so now you have a school teacher participating in custody interference because they're enmeshed. Let's use the same word.
It is, right.
They're enmeshed with the parent and siding with the one parent, not knowing the other side. And so our message and through this whole conference was, you cannot interfere with custody orders. So we need schools to stop interfering. And you don't know both sides. And you don't get to decide, because you want to err on the side of caution, that the child can't be with the other parent, or you can reject the other parent from being there if there's a court order that says otherwise. So this is a message we're trying to get out there as well.
Right. I mean, in this book that I have written, I have a mom in here whose ex is running the courtroom like a three-ring circus. He's literally controlling everything, even with a court order that she can, this is her, Natalia Dalton, completely alienated this father. The judge doesn't care. She even has orders to go see what's going on at school. And they won't give her any information because it's all
She's
on what
the parent, and by law,
they won't do it.
Court order is law. The school is now violating a court order. So the police, this is another message that I had for police officers, is they have to uphold the court orders. It's a court order. Now, I know that there's this, and this kind of ties right back into the reason why you want family court reformed. I get it. So the police, they know that they're supposed to uphold a court order, right? But it's exhausting when nothing comes of that. So they learn very quickly to, like, well, it's just going to get ignored anyway, so why am I going to bother? You're going to bother because I want you to stop looking at the parents and their conflict. So if you get called to a domestic dispute with the family and the parents are in conflict, I want you to start looking at the child. They read body language. Police officers and law enforcement officers, they can understand the conversations that are not being held verbally. So I want them to start focusing on the children to assess what's really going on. And then there's telltale signs. Which parent is the child going to navigate to first and cower under? Because that's a telltale sign that there's some psychological control type things that could possibly be in play. And there's no way a child would know how to hate another parent without being taught how to hate them. That's just not normal. So if a parent has talked to a child about their other parent in a derogatory way, that is child psychological abuse. You've just abused your child. So this has been such a huge conversation with this conference from all different aspects of adult survivors, bringing this kind of information forward. And we're sharing, this is what we see, this is our experiences, and this is what we want to do to help help with the identification of it, because we haven't been able to talk before. We haven't been invited to conferences to share our experiences. And I'm not sure exactly why. Why are they not coming to us for that type of thing? So we put on our own conference. We decided to bring our voices out there anyway, so that we can share. So judges and lawyers and school teachers and law enforcement officers will never know how devastating this is if we don't tell them.
Well,
So
I tried telling one of them in Starbucks as he was holding his coffee, and I said, "Do you know what custodial interference is?" He said, "Well, that's a civil matter." I said, "No, it's in our penal codes. We've got penal codes." I mean, I'm in Pennsylvania, and
if
20,
one more
29
person says, "Oh, that's a civil matter,"
oh,
this adult survivor child is going to come unglued,
yeah, I was,
because that
yes,
is not a good enough answer. That is I'm too busy or too uninformed to deal with that. So
right.
I don't want to hear it. That's what I hear.
I told him, I said, "You've got penal codes. You guys weren't trained on this in police academy. You guys have to have training on this
Mm-hmm.
because of course." And then his little thing went off, and he had to go on a call.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the other thing. If next time someone's standing in the Starbucks talking to an officer about custody interference, it's only one step away from child abduction.
Yes.
So what are you going to interfere and protect that child from being abducted? I'm an abducted child. And I
Hmm.
will tell you, just because it was a parent that abducted me didn't make it less traumatic.
Oh.
The uproot, the devastation of losing another parent that I was close to, feeling like they didn't care. So I had rejection and abandonment from that. And then I thought that they were a horrible person. And then I have the guilt for thinking that. So this is the lifetime sentence that I'm talking about. I had a living bereavement for a parent that I felt close to. And the psychological abuse was making my mind distorted over what is true and what isn't true.
Hmm.
So this is what they are protecting. They're protecting children from having to go through what we've gone through, the identity crisis.
Hmm.
There's there's all kinds of stuff, the anxiety, the depression, the phobias, the factitious disorder imposed on another. That's what we're talking about here. This isn't just, well, I didn't feel like dropping off the kid. It's more than that. It's that's only the facade in the front. Let's go behind that. You got to get behind those walls and figure out what's going on. Now, police officers can only do so much. They can only uphold a court order, right?
Hmm.
If the court order says you must do this, this, and this, it's not a civil matter.
Right. Right.
That's law.
I think the law enforcement needs a lot of training now. They
They
need to be
do.
trained. I went there with a court order to the state police. Well, they called the DA on call, and they said, "Well, they're in family court. They'll have to hash it out there."
But that's the problem,
Right.
is we're expecting family court to hash out mental health behaviors.
Thank you.
It doesn't fit. You're
No.
sending them to the wrong place, the wrong direction.
This also leads into the abolishment of family court because I don't think you can reform corruption. And what other parents are telling me is that, if you want to win your case, find a judge who's BFFs with an attorney where they have worked in the DA's department for years. You'll win your case.
That is disgusting.
It is. I
That
mean,
is
that's,
disgusting. And
yeah,
it's a strategy. I mean, they use it in criminal court too. It's a
right,
strategy across the board.
right.
So they play golf on the weekends and they fight it out in court on the weekdays. So it's it is insane to
Hmm.
watch it. But I'm noticing more and more there's documentaries coming out that they don't even realize they're talking about this. But the story is surrounded by child psychological abuse. And
Hmm.
I'm glad for it, except that it's still not being pointed out because they're not recognizing it as an abuse. They're not seeing it, oh, it's just family conflict.
Hmm.
It's an abuse. So, like Wayne Brady is someone that, if anybody knows who Wayne Brady is, put him in contact with me because he is actually an adult survivor of this as well. And he has TV shows that he's going on, and he actually did discuss parental alienation on one of the episodes.
Hmm.
So he's starting to become more informed about it. So if we can start sharing these things more and more from our perspectives, that may help in the meantime, because I don't know whether or not family court should or shouldn't ever be abolished. It definitely needs an overhaul.
Right.
Definitely needs an injection of mental health experts first and foremost. If we can't do anything else, it needs that
I
before
agree.
one more child goes through that court.
And it also can't be someone who's connected to the judge.
No, that's a conflict of interest. And
Right.
anywhere else, that would be so. How, when you're talking about corporate America, for example, just use them. If there's a conflict of interest in me being able to go and buy stock because I have an advantage, I have a little bit of knowledge in the background, then why is it okay for a lawyer and a judge to be BFFs? So who is regulating these situations? Because it's hard when you have a conflict of interest. And I'll give an example. In my own divorce, the judge that we were sitting in front of was the employer of my ex-husband's father before he passed away. He was a bailiff in that person's courtroom. So there was a family connection. Do you think I stood a chance?
Mm.
I didn't stand a chance.
No.
So everything I asked for was denied. And he got away with not paying child support.
Mhm.
So, and tried to get alimony. That's the one thing I did. I did win that because he was
Mhm.
trying, not alimony, he was trying to get palimony.
Oh, okay.
But I was a stay-at-home mom when we were married. I was only making money after we separated.
Mhm.
So I created a career. I went back to work. And then he wanted me to pay palimony from that. So that was the one thing the judge said, no, not getting palimony. But he didn't have to pay thousands of dollars in child support, didn't have to pay for transportation, but he was awarded every Christmas, every Easter, and every summer break.
That's
And
messed up.
who's gonna pay for that? Me.
Mhm.
Because he's not going to meet. He was supposed to pay 50% of, but he wasn't even paying child support. So he's not gonna pay 50% of anything.
Right.
So I had no support, zero support. Didn't even want to. And
Yeah.
we had a judge that knew his father very
Th-
well.
Right. There's some connection. If you're losing your case, I tell parents, if you're losing your case, there's a connection or they're being paid off.
Yep. So my answer, and this wasn't until after we had already gone through the proceedings and after the divorce was finally final, that's when I found out about this conflict of interest. So when I got a message saying, I'll just take you back to court, I'm like, let's do that. Yep. Let's go back to court. I'd be happy to go back to court because I'm going to have this whole thing thrown out because your dad used to work for the judge.
Mhm.
And that was the end of it. No more threats after that.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just it's a deadly, arena in there, and I try to talk to parents before they, I don't know, go in there, think about going in there, just don't go in
Don't
there.
do it. Don't do it. I mean, there's better ways of doing this. It's not fun, and you're not going to be best friends when you get through it. You're still not going to get along. You're probably not going to have any respect for each other. Whatever fell apart is probably still going to exist, but you can do it without the high conflict.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
can do it by getting your custody agreement done ahead of time. That's the only reason why, I mean, besides separating out your assets, that's what the judge should be deciding. But your kids are not your assets.
Mhm.
And that is a myth that people think that children are part of that asset distribution. No, we are not. There is nothing on earth that can change the biology of a child's parent.
Mhm.
Can't do it. So we're not an asset. We're a human being and we're going to have a life outside of this conflict.
Mm.
Let's give me the best chance possible for me to have a life that I can thrive in rather than one I have to fix. I don't want to have to fix all the BS that went on with my parents. So,
Right, even these kids that have gone through this and have been alienated, they'll again, like you said, well, they'll pick a psychologist who doesn't know what they're doing and what they're dealing with.
And that can create more damage by trying to help a child that you do not, one, understand the trauma. So if they're not trauma informed, then they're not a good pick. If they do not have lived experience in child psychological abuse, they're not a good pick.
Mm-hmm.
So if they don't know what it is, they're not going to be able to have the empathy needed to help the healing aspect of it. So we have to train mental health experts, and we have to learn how to interview and not settle for someone that we picked in the phone book.
Right.
Okay. Phone book, going back to your 50s theme there.
Right. My 50s Christmas tree theme. Yes.
So
Yeah.
just because you have one therapist doesn't mean you have to ever go to them again. You need to get to know who they are. You need to ask the right questions. So you need to interview them before you get to the point where you're going to tell them your entire life story. Because what really sucks is have to go to another therapist and start that process over.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
want to have to tell another therapist the whole story
Mm-mm.
all over again, because that's me training them. I have sat in front of mental health therapists. They could be therapists. I think I've gone to a, a clinical psychotherapist. I think actually it was a clinical psychologist. So one time I went to a clinician. The rest of the time it's been therapies of some sort. And I've had to actually train them because they didn't know what happened to me at all. Now that I know that it's child abuse and that it's child psychological abuse, we have these right terms now, where if I go into someone's office and I ask them what's their experience with child psychological abuse and they say I don't have any, time to walk out.
Right. Right.
Go somewhere else. Go find someone. Or maybe they're interested in learning more about it, but that you don't want to. I'm not going to pay someone to learn how to do it. That's what I've already done. I've already paid someone to learn from me so that they could learn how to treat me.
Mm-hmm.
They should be paying me. I gave them an education.
Right. Right. But what if they cannot find one in their area?
Right now, we're moving to a lot of virtual meetings. It
Mm-hmm.
might be time to start looking for those options.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there's therapists that do virtual meetings. So depending on the areas, um, they definitely need to seek them out, and they need to start asking the question about what their experience is with child psychological abuse. One, do you know what it is?
Mm-hmm.
No, walk out. Two, do you have lived experience with it? No, walk out.
Mm-hmm.
Because that person, unless they have an enormous amount of experience with it, that they have, and maybe they have a different form of child abuse that could be like, they could at least empathize with the trauma. That may be okay. But if they don't have any childhood trauma experience, then that's not the therapist for you.
Mm-hmm.
You need to find someone that actually knows how to deal with childhood trauma.
It's so difficult to find what they're looking for. It's got to be.
Because we haven't talked about it enough. Because we have been sitting on the sidelines watching the experts fight it out. Like, we're sitting here watching mom and dad fight all over again. It's kind of stupid. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just cut it out and get serious about this. My life is serious enough for me to take it into my own hands to put on my own conference, because I couldn't trust that somebody else was going to do it for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to do it myself. I wasn't sure that we could get Alyse's information from her twin studies into the right hands through the PA world, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't seem interested.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're not interested, then we have to take it in our own hands, and we have to take it out there ourselves. So we have to do this work ourselves, apparently, to get information out there to the main world. So we didn't target the PA world. We targeted mental health practitioners, attorneys, educators, lawyers, friends of the family court, anybody in the family court. We want to talk to mental health professionals and practitioners. We want to talk to educators, law enforcement officers, first responders. They are the ones that need to know what we look like after we grow up. This is it. This conference put that on display. And we didn't go in there. It was very professional. We had 4 doctors speaking that are all lived experience. All 4 of them have lived, well, except for one. There was an ally. So Dr. Childress came and spoke on behalf of us and introduced the conference and talked about the need for the adult survivors to find their own voice and come forward. So he's very supportive. He didn't come and speak as I'm an expert in this and telling us or anybody. He kind of covered what child psychological abuse is, and he wished us well. And that was basically his role, was to be our ally and help us get this out there. So the other 3 is Dr. Alyse Price-Tobler, Dr. Rebecca Bailey, and Dr. Stan Karosi. So they are the other 3 doctors that were able to come and speak on their own lived experience as well.
And that's hard to find people like that will speak out.
And then on top of that, when we were developing the conference and trying to figure out funding and all of that, somebody introduced me to Martin Mongello, Chef Marty Mongello. He is a former White House chef, and he after talking with him and getting to know him a little bit, found out that he is actually an adult survivor of child psychological abuse, as well as some other abuses. Like a lot of us, it's not just child psychological abuse. Sometimes there's vicarious traumas. Sometimes there's other forms of abuse, and we're looking at the most obvious. So child sexual abuse, for one, you can beat that out. Because I forgot. But that is one that if that is involved, people focus on that and not the child psychological abuse. It's okay to focus on both forms because they both exist together. In some cases, I'm not saying every case, but if they're both present, then they both need to be addressed. And sometimes it's because of the child psychological abuse is where it starts. And then it goes into the more advanced, the more diabolical kind of abuses. I mean, they're all kind of diabolical, but they start off with, and this is, I can equate this to, and I not have a happy group of parents, but in the cybersecurity world, I'm constantly looking and profiling online predators. And I can identify that is a form of child psychological abuse. So it's cyberbullying, trolling people on the internet. That's a mild form of of psychological abuse. And when you get into cyberbullying, that's psychological warfare. You know, you're elevating the abuse. And then the online predators have even mastered it to the extent that they can drive a wedge between a child and their parents, which is a form of alienation, right? So to me, they're no different. They're all pathogen. So a pathogenic parent is equivalent to an online predator. That's in my world. I can see the same patterns happening on both sides.
And that also is the grooming process.
Yeah, when it starts off in that first level of gaslighting, it starts off with a mild form of it. And then it elevates, and then it gets worse and worse and worse. And then you have a child who hates their parents or a parent. It doesn't matter if it's both parents or one parent. If one parent is alienating or abusing that child to hate one of their parents, and that's what an online predator does, you're no better than an online predator. It's hard truth.
It is. Most definitely. Now, what's your take on step parents that interfere?
So I am going to put a disclaimer out there right now that while I am aware that there are fabulous and wonderful and loving step parents out there,
Mhm.
The ones that aren't are who I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And I think that this particular area is, and especially in my experience, the step family blending does not work for a child. I'm not talking about the loving ones. I'm talking about the ones that think that they can come in and say, well, this is my family now. He's
Mhm.
my family or my wife. That's my husband. And you're not included in this anymore. You stay away. No,
Mhm.
that's pathogenic. You're talking about somebody that is splitting a family further apart. Now,
Mhm.
what's wrong with a child having a mom and a dad and a stepmommy and a stepdaddy?
Mhm.
That's more love. There's no reason for that. And yeah, you decided to marry into a split family, so you have to accept that.
Mhm.
You have to allow the child to still have access. And you may not like it, but you're going to have to figure out how to be the adult in the situation because you
Mhm.
married into it. So for those that think that they can come in and rip the family even further apart, and I know a lot of people that have had the alienating behaviors occur after the remarriage.
Mhm.
After someone remarried, that's all of a sudden when that happens. I think that's your story too.
True, and, the last time we talked and the first time you interviewed me, when time had passed, I just had picked up more kind of information that really I think the alienation was going on as he met the new wife, but even a little bit
Yeah.
before then as well.
Yeah. Oh, and it's possible because the new person coming in doesn't want to marry that. They don't want to marry the divorce.
Mhm.
But that's what you're doing when you come into a family that's gone through a divorce. You're marrying the divorce and whatever came out of the divorce.
Mhm.
You're marrying that. And that has to be a wide open decision. Your eyes wide open into that before you just walk into a relationship that you haven't fallen in love with the rest of it.
Uh-huh.
You are only loving one component of it, which is that person. That person has baggage. You have to
Right.
love the baggage. If you're going to marry that person, you have to love their baggage too. You have to love that they have a child that has another parent. And you're going to have to understand that there has to be drop-offs and pickups and coordinations. And no, the child may not be home when you want to have Christmas dinner. That's what you married into. So
Mhm.
I do not have sympathy for the person marrying into a broken family and expecting to bend and create them into being what they picture. That's not a picturesque kind of marriage. You want a
Mhm.
perfect marriage, you have to find somebody that hasn't gone through the divorce because the divorce is part of the package.
Mhm. Because even though the people that even have amicable divorces can co-parent until someone
Until,
else remarries, and then
well, and what broke down? What broke down? What broke down was somebody that wasn't willing to marry the divorce, to marry the baggage.
Mhm.
They wanted them for themselves. They want to take that is called isolation in a domestic violence situation. So this
Mhm.
now you're automatically starting into intimate partner violence, violent communication. You're already showing signs of alienating behavior. So if you're already gone through a divorce and you're already having that kind of conflict and you have someone that's coming in and trying to separate you even further, that should be a red flag all over the place
Mhm.
because they're already exhibiting those behaviors.
Mm. It's a shame, really. It just
It is.
I don't
It's sad.
know.
And here's the thing, I really think that there is a lot that we can do to help
Mhm.
if we have a society that can recognize the transgenerational trauma. Everybody needs to go and deal with their trauma.
Mhm.
If you're not dealing with your trauma, and if you think you don't have any trauma, think again.
Right.
We're all acting out of our trauma.
Mhm.
You can see it online. I see it online all the time. I see people spinning off on somebody because they didn't say the right term and they're just freaking out and just laying in on them. That's your trauma. You're projecting your trauma onto someone else who probably wouldn't even think about whatever it was you're thinking. Whatever was relevant to you wasn't what they intended. So we have to have this mindset of intention. Was it their intention to misspeak or use the wrong phrase, or if you didn't add the plus after something, or if you didn't do, I mean, there's so many different ways to disagree with people. And if I see it online, that's your trauma. I'm seeing people's trauma everywhere. I don't know what it was, but I'm seeing them act out of it.
And these are the people that generally won't go get help or talk
They
to a
don't even
psychologist.
realize they need it because
Right.
we have not normalized mental health. We do not talk about this kind of stuff. We haven't done it in schools. We haven't done it from our parents to now we're parents and now they're parents. We just passed it along
Right.
and we're told, well, just deal with it. This is the cards you were dealt, so just go live the best life you can.
Yeah.
No, don't say that.
Or snap out of it.
Yeah, or snap out of it, or get over it, or stop talking about it. Don't tell someone to stop talking about their trauma ever. You may not want to hear it, but that person needs to be able to talk about their trauma because that's how we learn to express that. And we put it into perspective when we can talk about it. Now, maybe that person wasn't the right person to talk to. Don't tell them to shut up. You can tell them something so simple, like, I really feel what you're saying, and it's very traumatizing, and I'm not qualified to really help you. I'm happy to listen, but I'm not qualified to help you. I could help you find someone that is. And so help them, guide them to a mental health professional. And then also, Alyse uses these. She created the senpai model. I don't know if you remember this. This is something that people can learn how to talk to somebody that has been traumatized, from the homeless to children. Doesn't matter who it is. The senpai social communication model helps you have a meaningful conversation with somebody that's gone through some kind of trauma. And a lot of times it's kids, and kids who have been through a high conflict divorce are often withdrawn. And who are they going to tell their problems to? Other kids. So if those other kids can learn how to speak to them using this model, because there's a child model as well, all they are doing is asking some questions. They're asking them, how's your senpai today? How's your sleep? How's your emotions? How's your meals and clothing? How's your physical health? How's your inclusion in community? These are the 5 basic needs of every human being. And if we can teach people how to really talk to someone about their 5 basic needs, you can find out a lot of information about them without responding or talking back about their answers. You just ask the questions and that's it. And at the end, it's the last question is, do you need extra time or more ongoing support? And for the children, it says, would you like me to help you find an adult that you can speak to? So these are things that there's tools out here that we can start using to help educate people how to have an emotionally intelligent conversation with someone who's been traumatized.
Yeah.
So
I think people, when they're talking to these alienated kids, I think they just will listen and then just walk away.
their eyes gloss over. I see it a lot. I
Yeah.
see it when I speak to other parents. I see the same thing. I see parents' eyes gloss over when I talk about what, something that may have happened to me that I've picked up out of their story with their children so I can relate to them. And then before you know it, after a little bit of conversation, they're totally lost. Like, it's to them, I don't know if it's just not the same because I'm not their child, but actually I am.
Yeah.
I'm speaking for your child. I'm speaking for your future child. When they reach my age, they'll be doing the same thing, maybe. But right now, nobody's speaking for the child, so I am, until they can find their voice. So everybody at this conference is speaking for the child until they can find their voice. This conference was about hearing the voices of the children.
Mhm.
And that's who we represent. A lot of us cannot get back or fix or change our situations, but we can actually help change it for the future generations. And it may take a while before it actually takes a hold. And this may be something that we just have to keep pushing through and
Mhm.
pushing through until we can get people really understanding what child psychological looks like, psychological abuse, what it looks like, what it means, what you can do about it, and how we can stop it and how we can treat it. And
I
then the book is just more stories of those situations
Mhm.
where they pull out that hope and resilience. Like, yeah, this happened to me, but guess what? We can heal. There's a
Mhm.
lot of people out there that say we are damaged and we will never heal, which
Mhm.
is a crock of bleep.
Mm.
That if you know what happened to you, it's easy to heal. When you don't know what happened to you, you get a lot of mental health professionals saying, I don't know how to help you. Just go live the best life you can,
Mhm.
which is malpractice. You, it's your responsibility to know how to help somebody with their mental health,
I agree. I
but they
agree.
don't
Well,
take it.
yeah, I've talked to a lot of parents. They're trying to get into these advocacy groups and help each other through this pain that you're grieving the life of a living
A
child.
living bereavement. Yeah. You're both living it. Yeah.
Mhm. I mean, I
And
think
it's
there's
good to have support. It's good to have
right.
a tribe. And that's what we're doing. You know, a
Mhm.
lot of us have connected, and there's several different groups out there. So I think it, you know, whatever resonates with you the most is where you should be. And whatever type of activism you want to participate in, some don't want to at all.
I
Some
know.
want to write a book, some want to put on a conference, some want to do both, some
Mhm.
want to just have campaigns here and there, some just want to speak, some just want to maybe talk to a parent or two here and there.
Mhm.
So we're all at different levels, and none of it is, you know, there's it's just whatever the person's capacity is, because our healing journeys are different. So we can't expect everybody to be like me and want to put on a conference and write 2 books in 1 year. That's
Mhm.
like, and I'm never doing that again either, by the
Yeah, don't do it. No, I know, I get
way.
it.
That was hard.
Yes, I can't
um,
imagine.
oh, it was exhausting, but it was so great. I'm so glad I did it. But yeah, I'm gonna have help the next time. It definitely
Yes.
needs the help. But
Yeah,
it
it's a
was
lot of work.
it was so successful. So started telling you about the conference where it was on October 10th, which is World Mental Health Awareness Day. We want to
Mhm.
claim it as Child Psychological Abuse Awareness Day as well, just
Mhm.
tagging on to that because perfect lineup for the mental health side of it.
Mhm.
And here we get Helene, 11 days. So we're talking about the last day of September. Helene goes through and does a lot of damage to the area that we were going to have our venue.
Ugh.
And we decided we have to go virtual. And we thought, well, there's a couple of us that still wanted to, you know, just at least be in the same room together. It doesn't have to be as big. And so we were thinking about maybe doing that. And then Milton came along, made sure that that wasn't going to happen either. And that one was coming right at Tampa. So on Wednesday, we lost power and I was not going to be able to put on the conference. So luckily, I planned ahead. I put together an entire show flow. So I had start and stop times for every single thing that I wanted to happen during the day. And I also had links for everything they needed. So we had the slide deck for the speaker intros. We had everything on the show flow. So all someone had to do was follow that. We could get to the conference.
Mhm.
So we were practicing Monday, I think, with a couple of the ladies. They came in and I had them logging into Zoom and like, just in case I lose power, I'm going to need somebody to, the show must go on.
Right.
It cannot be canceled because something happened to Tampa.
Mhm. Mhm.
This is a global event. So one hurricane can't stop a global event. We just can't let it happen. And it just seemed like there were so many things stacked against us and trying to keep this conference from happening and keep the book from being published. And it's like, no, 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 not going to let it stop us. So I just planned ahead. I prepared for the hurricane to, at least lose power. And thank God that we did that. And thank God that we had them logging in so that they knew how to, and it was a little clunky at first. I mean, you're all of a sudden you're putting on someone else's conference. I'm literally giving control of something I created to someone else to handle. And it was so nerve-wracking for all of us. We were like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I woke up Thursday and it was hot because we're still in Florida and without power. Even though there's wind bust, stuff going on outside, we can't open the windows. You can't get any kind of fresh air because you got like, I don't even know how many, at least 60 to 70 mile an hour winds going on outside. Yeah, there's probably even more than that. But by the time it got here, it was starting to weaken. So I don't know the exact speed of the wind, but you just can't just like open up your windows.
Right.
And I think I did try to open the bathroom window just to see if I could tell what was going on outside. And the rain was coming right in through the screen, pelting me in the face. I'm like, yeah, nope, close the window.
So much for that. I mean,
Yeah,
it's commendable that you had this going despite all of that.
despite all of that. So they got the conference going. Alyse was going first because she's in Australia. It's late at night for her, but thankfully she was there. So they figured it out. They got things moving, and then it started getting into a groove. And then I got power back around 3 p.m., I think. So I was able to join the panel discussion at least. I didn't have a lot of time to get ready after the power came on. I wanted to, so I made the best with the hair situation that I could. It just got on. And it was wonderful. It was great to be able to finally be there. And then when Alyse had left, she was supposed to go and sleep while we were doing the rest of the conference. I'm doing the conference by my cell phone and basically just working in the background. And Marty, Chef Martin, who the White House former chef, he's just sending me messages like, hey, there's a typo on this speaker slide. Can you fix that? So I'm like going into Canva on my phone and I'm fixing this stuff on the fly, trying to do everything I can in the background to keep them going. And yeah, and I would pipe in every now and then and talk or clarify or add in or whatever. So I was able to at least participate in my own conference. It was unbelievable. So when Alyse got back on, she's like, oh my gosh, it was like we're on the screen together for the conference. So it really meant a lot that we were able to be there and do the panel discussion. So then Friday comes along and it was such an amazing, it just turned out so good. Everybody did such a wonderful job on their speeches and the messages that they were trying to bring. And it was amazing. It was the most amazing thing I've ever done. And as exhausting as it was just, I wouldn't change it for the world. So we got through all the Friday speeches. And then for the last half of the day, we had people from National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, two people. We had Dr. Stan Karosi, he's on the board of directors for PASG. So we've had a lot of people that were in these areas, and including Dr. Childress, who just popped in to talk about child psychological abuse and what the adult survivors are trying to do as far as using our voice, and just being our ally. It was so great. It was everything was just so good. And then the panel discussion for Friday. So what I designed it to do is have all the speeches, and then the last hour or so of the day would be a panel discussion, so that people from the audience could ask questions and whatnot. Well, Chef Marty decided to give us a chance to go on his Present network. So we did our panel discussion on Friday afternoon globally. It went all over the world.
Nice.
So
nice.
Dr. Childress is on there. Everybody else was on there. That there was some glitchy internet stuff for some people, so not everybody was able to stay on long. But it was still such an amazing way to end the conference. It was like such a high. And then as soon as it was over and we said goodbye, it was like 6 o'clock, I think. And I went and I sat down in my reclining chair and I was out.
I bet. That's so
Out.
exhausting.
I was so exhausted. It took me weeks to get out of this hurricane conference hangover that I had.
I bet. I bet. Yeah,
I'm just now coming out of it.
oh, I cannot imagine. I can't. You know, is the public able to see that conference? Is that online somewhere or no?
Well, because I was able to get continuing legal education credits for it,
Hmm.
it's not available for free.
Okay.
So I'm just wrapping up the editing part of it because I couldn't do it the first 2 weeks. I just could not
Hmm.
get my brain into editing at all. It's just I was like staring at the screen and not knowing what to even do. So it took me a couple weeks to get back into editing. So I have day one just about done, and we're trying to figure out where we're going to put it. So we're thinking about a learning management system type of deal where you can come in. So what I did is I went to the Florida bar and I showed them my plan for the conference,
Hmm.
and they came back and gave me 15 CLEs. Attorneys only need 30 for the entire year. So they can
Hmm.
take care of half of their CLE credit needs in one 2-day conference and watch the Erasing Family documentary as well, because that was already in there. So
Hmm.
they watch the film, they can watch it for free on Tubi, they can watch it on YouTube, or they can go to erasingfamily.org and watch it there as well. And then that's where all the information with Ginger and
Hmm.
other stuff is available there. So they watch the 2-day conference replay on demand, and they
Hmm.
can still earn 15 CLEs. Now, 7 of those 15 count towards their mental health requirements. So Florida attorneys are actually required to have mental health learning credits. Did you know that?
No.
They are required. So every Florida attorney in this state needs to come and watch this conference so that they can learn this stuff.
Yes.
So I don't know what their mental health final number is for the year, but if it's like if 30 is the CLEs and half of that or near half of that is mental health, I'm thinking maybe 15. I could be wrong, but that's just doing quick math. But
Hmm.
whatever their criteria is, you know, they can take out half of the need right off the bat.
Right.
So,
Right.
and here's the other thing. Just because the Florida Bar accredited the conference, which is amazing, like our
Yeah.
conference was accredited by the Florida Bar. So this is huge.
Hmm.
You don't have to be a Florida attorney if your state has the reciprocity agreement and you can actually watch the conference and gain the credits for your state requirements. Now you have to check with your state to figure out, because like California has some weird circumstances where you can go to another conference, but you can't be in the state of California for that conference
Mm.
for it to count. You have to actually like keep the state. So I'm not sure exactly how that works
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
it's a virtual conference. So, but there's also a lot of self-reporting available to a lot of people globally. So
Hmm.
mental health practitioners around the world can watch this conference, and if they can self-report, they can claim 15 learning credits or
Hmm.
education credits. Now, Alyse, for example, she's a mental health practitioner in Australia. If she watches the conference, she can have 15 CLEs.
Hmm.
And also, because she's speaking at the conference, she can also get credit for that. So there's lots of ways that this can actually benefit more than just the Florida attorneys.
Yeah. I think this is
So
great.
it's worth the money, because I mean I know that there's payments for some of the CLEs
Hmm.
that they have to, and a lot of them are always willing to pay for that education, especially when we have education that's wrapped around a PhD and the
Hmm.
legal side of things. Because I always bring in the legal side. Alyse does a lot of the mental health, and then I'll talk more on the cyber or legal side of things. So um, it's a great way to wrap it up. So I'm working as fast as I can. I promise I'm working as fast as I can to get the editing all done. Day one was the hardest one because that's the one where I have to add in all the stuff that I would have done.
Mm-hmm.
So I've added all that in, and now I'm just waiting for it to render. So I have to wait till after we're done here for me to render one of them because it's going to take a while
Okay,
for
so
it to
you're
do.
thinking by Tuesday this should be done.
Well, I'm hoping. I'm
Oh,
hoping.
good.
Yeah.
Good.
And then at least we could get one day up there and they could get started on that. And then I can, day two, I shouldn't have to do a lot of editing. I think
Hmm.
the only editing I might do is to break it into smaller chunks
Right.
and then sell it and, kind of combine certain ones together and
Hmm.
sell those as like maybe 4 separate packages. Day one, day one, part two, day two, part one, day two, part two, and
Right.
do it that way.
Right.
It might be the best way to do it.
Oh, this is great you did this. That was a lot of stress, but it was well worth it.
Oh my gosh, it
Oh,
was so well worth it. We are so
mhm.
happy with the way it turned out. Considering all the stuff, all the challenges that we've had along the way with this, and how well we did, and
Mhm.
the it was just it was amazing. Everybody
Yeah.
did such a fantastic job, and the book is amazing. And we have how many authors? I think
Is it?
15 or 16,
Mhm.
16 authors, including me. I think so.
I'm trying. I'm looking.
I think it is 16. So
Yeah.
these are collected works by these authors,
Mhm.
and they all have a different perspective on how they presented. Like the criteria is you have to be an adult survivor of child psychological abuse.
Mhm.
But we don't tell you what you can and can't write about.
Mhm.
We tell you we want you to bring out the hope and resilience because we don't want to be puking a lot in this book. However,
Yeah.
there's a lot of very raw, strong stories in here for a reason because we have to let people know that this is actually abuse.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we can't tell, I'm not going to tell an adult survivor to shut up about their abuse.
Right.
We can't silence us any more than we've already been silenced.
Mhm.
So when they're talking about those intersecting traumas, even though some people might think, well, that's not parental alienation.
Mm.
If they're connected to parental alienation, they just have to bring that up and then they can write about their story however they want because this is a process. This is only one chapter. There's another chapter coming.
Mhm.
So as they develop their method of working through this book, they can determine how they're going to display it or how they're going to present it.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of information. We're talking about CSA is included in
Mhm.
this. We're talking about actual physical violence
Mhm.
that we're talking about. So yeah, there's child
Mhm.
psychological abuse and there's also these other abuses. There's abuses where, the step parent has come in and now all of a sudden there's alienation or, they're actually performing child psychological abuse
Mhm.
in this blended family. So like I said before, I am not a fan of the blended family unless that step parent has enough love to wrap themselves into this family and
Mhm.
like they can let the child love their other parent and just realize that there's somebody else on the other side
Mhm.
that is a part of the family you joined. That's the only way I can, and I swore off because I started dating after my divorce and I was like, I am not after the domestic violence that I went through with the fiance. I literally almost married the mob. He was
Mm.
he was connected, and he got embarrassed by what I call their godfather.
Yeah. Oh.
He was embarrassed because I didn't make it home in time, and they made a comment about what you can't control your woman, and that set things
Mm-mm.
into motion. And he tried to put me through a wall. He was abusing me until a friend of mine
Mhm.
came over and she had to actually grab a knife out of the butcher block to get him to back off of me. It was horrible. And my
Mhm.
kids were in the room right there.
Oh.
They were watching. Well, they were trying not to watch. They didn't know
Mhm.
what to do. But it
Mhm.
was devastating. Devastating. It was horrific. And after that I
Oh.
thought he was also telling me things like once we're married, you're not the disciplinarian. That's my role. And I'm like, is this Sicilian?
Yeah,
Because
right, right.
because he's from Sicily. So I'm like, no, if I'm not going to let their own father mess them up, I'm certainly not going to let you.
Oh,
So
exactly, exactly.
yeah, like now they already have a dad. They don't
Right.
need to be messed up by someone else. So I swore off of the blended family because of my childhood experience with the blended family and me almost being murdered by a
Mm,
stepsister. And just having that type of violence and abuse going on when I was a child and the rejection from the rest of the family, all of that, I decided I was not putting my kids through that. I was
no,
not going to put a spouse in front of them.
mhm.
So
Well,
that's what we have to think of
yeah,
when we
that's
get
what
remarried.
exactly, because when I was remarrying, it's like, well, I don't want, he's not gonna discipline my kids. My kids are my problem. And I told him, I said, "If they sass you back, you come and tell me, and I'll handle it."
Hmm.
So if there's any issues, because I want them to like you and not look at you as an aggressor. So if Johnny says, something to you, F off, whatever, you come to me and I will deal with it.
Hmm.
And of course, my husband doesn't have kids, so we really didn't have the blended issue. So, my kids had it pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. It's sad when they're caught between that because not only do they have to navigate their own parents' conflict, now they have to navigate the step parents side of it. And if both parents remarried, now they're regulating more than one parent.
Mhm.
And children can become masters at this for their own self preservation. And they don't even know that's what they're doing, but they know how to avoid problems.
Right.
They're, and so they end up closing off and they don't deal with their emotions because they don't know how to.
Mhm.
So if a child is going into a courtroom and just telling the judge about, I'm so mad about this and this and this, first of all, children don't understand their emotions. So how does a child know what to say in a court of law?
Mm.
If
Mhm.
they are told what to say, that should be a clue to the judge that somebody's been telling this child that they're feeling angry
Right.
because there's certain age levels that you learn certain things. And a lot of times these kids, their frontal lobe's not developed. We've already talked about a lot of that until they're 25,
Mhm.
26 years old, and sometimes even later in life, depending on the circumstances. So
Right.
a child until they're age 18 cannot make a good decision.
Mhm.
So you're expecting 18 to be the age where they'll know what to do. And that doesn't
Mm.
make them competent. I'm not saying that they're incompetent, but that doesn't
Mhm.
make them competent in this area until they're older. And if they don't have the wherewithal or the knowledge or the seeking of mental health therapy
Mhm.
or healing, they're not going to ever think it was a problem. And then they're going to repeat the problem because
Mm.
they don't know that it is one.
Ugh.
So if
There's
we don't start talking and saying this is a problem, a
Mhm.
lifelong problem, we're allowing people to continue to abuse their next generation. So this is child abuse. It's
Right.
going further and further and further.
And this is generational.
Hmm.
It's really a shame.
It is. And for those that want to say, parental alienation is junk science, we're not talking about any one person because we already know that this kind of stuff was happening way before somebody coined the term. So
Right.
call it whatever the hell you want to call it. I don't care because I'm the child in this perspective. And I call it child psychological abuse. It's abuse.
Mhm.
That's what it is.
Mhm.
And if we look at it, if you don't like the parental alienation word, then let's talk about intimate partner violence. Let's
Mhm.
talk about domestic violence. Let's talk
Mhm.
about abuse of the spousal abuse. Let's talk about your interference of custody. Let's talk about some of these other things. Let's
Yeah.
get real. You want to get real? Let's get real.
Right.
You don't like the umbrella term parental alienation. I get that because
Well,
it doesn't help.
they
It
don't
doesn't
like it.
help in
I
court.
Right. They don't like it because, they say Richard Gardner coined it, but really he didn't coin it. It's been around for the
It's
last
been around
200.
forever.
Right. And it was even in the book called Negative Love, written by Bob Hoffman in 1979.
They just don't like Richard Gardner, and he did some things that were questionable. So I get the reason why,
Right.
we always want to cancel everybody out.
Yeah.
You
I mean,
you can't just cancel it. These things can exist at the same time.
right. Right. Well said. I'm so glad you did all this work. I'm sorry it took so much out of you because I'm sure it did.
It did, but I went into it eyes wide open. I knew exactly what I was doing. I just didn't know how much work it was going to be. Uh, and once you're in it, you're in it. It's like I'm not the one thing you can say about most of us child survivors is the tenacity.
Hmm.
When we get something in our mind, I am that tenacious. I will make sure. Like, don't tell me I can't do something because you can hold my beer and watch me.
Yeah, right.
Except I replace that with Fireball because I don't like beer.
Yeah, yeah. I don't do beer either. No, I like the rum chata.
Yeah, add some Fireball to rum chata. This is so
Oh,
good.
yes,
Yep.
yes. Or even better, well, I don't know if it's better yet, but vodka, salted caramel vodka with the rum
Ooh, I
chata.
love salted caramel. That sounds good. I don't drink a
Yeah,
lot, but I'll have to try that.
I'm starting to. No, I'm just kidding. I don't. I really don't. I say I
Uh,
do, but I don't. But hey, I'd like to have you come back on again. And
oh, absolutely.
how can people reach you if they have any questions?
I'm all over social media. Facebook and LinkedIn are I am Dawn McCarty. I'm on YouTube at Dawn McCarty. Twitter is also Dawn McCarty. So if you do a search for Dawn McCarty on social media, you'll find me.
Okay, great. Great. Well, hey, don't jump off, okay?
Okay.
Okay, Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Maryann Petri. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, and other platforms I don't know about. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. I totally thank you, Dawn McCarty, for coming on and giving us all this valuable information. Thank you so much.
Absolutely happy to share about it, and hopefully we can make the world a better place for children in the future generations.
I think this is an excellent start. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.